Welcome, everyone. My name is Susan Patterson. I'm the director of Through God's Grace Ministry, an organization directed mainly to the Christian faith community to equip them in the fight against human trafficking. We accomplish that goal through our YouTube channel and events like the one you're about to join. You can find the dates for our upcoming meetings at our website, and the link for that is in the video description below. At this meeting, you will have the opportunity to hear from 8 courageous and inspiring men who have been successful in engaging men in the fight against sex trafficking. These men are from all over the country, have efforts like Men Standing Against Trafficking, Bikers Against Trafficking, Fathers in Hip Hop, and many more. Sex trafficking will end when there is no more sex buying. And the best way to accomplish that is to bring more men into our efforts to combat sex trafficking so that they can raise awareness with other men. During this panel discussion, you will hear what works to enroll men to participate, strategies to reduce porn viewing, which is one of the factors that is driving demand, and these panel members will also share what they're doing to encourage fatherhood as a way to prevent daughters from becoming victims. You can find more videos on what you can do to join the fight against human trafficking at our channel. And if you would like to invite the panel members to be a speaker at any of your awareness events, their contact information is in the video description below. As host of this event, we begin with my introduction of the MC. Let's join the panel now. Patrick is we're in Southern California, and in Southern California, Patrick is a true hero to all of us with regard to what it is that he's accomplished. Beginning in 2010, while working with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees in Los Angeles, USA for UNHCR, Patrick first learned of human trafficking from field agents working in Africa. In 2012, he began leading the prevention subcommittee of the Long Beach Human Trafficking Task Force. As an activist, he has organized a number of events, such as 2 youth exploitation safety symposiums for the city of Long Beach, 2 FatherCon conferences for fathers, father figures, and future fathers. And he's going to be talking more about that when we talk about the importance of fatherhood. And in 2020, he produced the 2nd annual See It, End It Film and Arts Festival, a 6-day event showing 25 films with 50 speakers and presenters from around the world, including survivors of sex and labor trafficking. He has led demonstrations every month for over 3 years until COVID, with Men Standing Against Trafficking on portions of the track commonly used by traffickers in Long Beach. His knowledge of the dynamics of human trafficking is vast, and you can contact him or any of our panel members to find out what subjects they speak on. And every one of these panel members are fabulous speakers, and I want to encourage you to contact them for upcoming events you may have. So Patrick, I'm turning this over to you.
Thank you so much, Susan. And I think for anyone who knows the things that Susan's doing, it's really phenomenal and inspiring to see actually how much impact she's having in the faith community, especially, and for drawing us all together. I'm so grateful for everyone who's tuned in today. I think I was preparing for this, and I was trying to think of some TED Talky way to kind of some jokey way to kick off this event, and I just couldn't do it. I'm sorry. For me, when I start thinking about men and engaging men in this fight, it's just we're losing too many guys that are falling through the cracks. Really good men who should be in this fight with us. I'm reminded of a friend of mine he was a youth leader, father of 5 children, really good man who's now sitting in prison because of the things that happened in the dark that seeped into the spaces between the bricks of his kindness and his goodness. And we've got just too many men that are falling through the cracks that are being missed. And we need them on board with us to end human trafficking. So I'm really hoping that today, as we kick this off, that you can pick up some new tools that you can use in your own ministries, in your own work to end human trafficking. I hope that we can start laying new rails so we can get men who are off track back on the track of being the men and being the fathers they need to be. And that we can just be inspired together. We really need this kind of to share together, to get ourselves really back inspired and enthusiastic about the work that needs to be done in engaging men in the fight against human trafficking. So thank you so much for each and every one of you for being here and sharing this time this morning. I'm going to get right into introducing this incredible panel, because these are some amazing men you're going to hear from today. Pastor Arnold Cefax. Pastor Cefax has been involved in the ministry for over 38 years, 9 of them serving as the founder and senior pastor of Kingdom Business Community Church in Milwaukee. Currently, Pastor Sivak serves as the Vice President Board Chair of the Convergence Resource Center, a faith-based community service organization providing client-focused, trauma-informed care, including education and training for community organizations and service providers. While on his board, he serves as the director of HEMAD. I love this name, HEMAD, Human Trafficking Educators Working with Men and Boys to Stand Against the Demand. So he should be mad. Human trafficking, let's see, last year, a HEMAD campaign reached out to 45,000 men through the country to take the pledge. So they have a pledge that we are men who are going to stand against human trafficking. He's looking to have an army of men across the country take a stand against human and sex trafficking. So let's welcome Pastor Arnold Cefax.
Good morning, all. I almost said good morning, men. I'm so used to speaking to men. So good morning, all. Again, I'm Arnold Cefax. I'm Pastor Arnold Cefax. I am the youth director at New Testament Church, and my name is pronounced Cefax. I know it's a little difficult. It's a strange name, but I have been doing this now. We're going into our 4th year with HEMAD. It's interesting that the acronym turned out to be HEMAD. That was not the plan, but it fits. HEMAD. So that's the core of it.
Thank you so much. Okay, next I want to introduce Pastor Dan Broyles. Many people know him throughout Southern California. He's a licensed marriage family therapist and also pastor at Valencia Hills Community Church. Previously, he was a social worker for the Department of Child and Family Services. Currently, he's the co-chair for the Faith Collaborative for DCFS. And for the past 6 years, he served as the chairman for the Santa Clarita Valley Human Trafficking Task Force, which is engaging nonprofits, schools, health professionals, and churches in the fight against human trafficking. Recently, he was given the award of Community Citizen of the Year, well-deserved, by the Santa Clarita chapter in the National Association for Social Workers. So welcome, Pastor Dan.
Yeah, thanks so much. And just really glad to be here. And I'm just so glad you guys are giving up your time to do something that's so worthwhile. I mean, and Patrick, thanks for what you're doing and the hard work you're doing to help men.
Thank you so much. Well, we all got our part to play. Next, I'd like to introduce Joe Sullivan, has served as the deacon of the Catholic Church since 2013. Joe's passion is fighting injustice. He started a justice and peace ministry at St. Bonaventure soon after his ordination, and that ministry continues to raise awareness and support organizations which fight injustice, particularly in the areas of homelessness, hunger, life issues, and human trafficking. Joe currently serves on the Faith-Based Action Committee of the Orange County Human Trafficking Task Force and gives talks to men's groups with the goal of ending the demand for sex trafficking. This talk focuses on poverty and pornography as major drivers of trafficking, what law enforcement is doing, and how we can protect our children, especially foster children, as potential victims, and how to help survivors. Thank you so much, Joe, for everything you're doing.
Thanks. Glad to be here. Good to see you all too. Thanks.
Great. And next we move on to Ken Henry, who's near and dear to my heart. Ken Henry spent the last 20 years working as a community leader and organizer. He currently serves as head of operations for Alive in Texas, a nonprofit that produces awareness events to prevent sex trafficking. In addition to his academic degrees, Ken is also a graduate of the National Human Trafficking Leadership Academy in Washington, D.C. Ken created his own program entitled Code Black that he developed as part of the Breaking the Chains curriculum, where he mentors at-risk Black youth ages 12 to 24. Ken's background also includes working with brain injuries survivors. His work with victims and survivors of human trafficking and his background in mentoring skills, combined with his knowledge of brain science, has made it possible for him to make tremendous strides in working with human trafficking survivors, as they're all victims of trauma, which negatively impacts the brain. Ken brings that background to churches to teach them how to be trauma-informed. In addition, Ken is part of the steering committee for the Compton Human Trafficking Task Force and is currently a member of the core group of the National Black Faith Coalition Against Human Trafficking. Ken also has an online radio show, and his skill set includes being a professional vocal recording artist, entertainment host, and motivational speaker. And I would like to add that he has joined me on the street corners for men standing against trafficking and taken a stand with other men. And Anyway, welcome very much, Ken. It's good to see you.
You too, my friend. You too, guys. Good morning. Good morning. A very southern, I'm gonna give you guys a southern hospitality. Good morning from Texas here. I'm getting integrated back in that culture now that I'm here. So everything's a little slower. But anyway, yeah, guys, thank you for being here. Susan, thank you for your time. This platform again, you always give so tirelessly behind the scenes to organize this. And I definitely know how much work that is to organize things like this on a consistent basis. Patrick, of course, I love you, my brother. Thank you for stepping up and being our wonderful MC today. It's always being good for me to be introduced by someone that I actually know and I've worked with. So thank you, guys. And thank you for the introduction. I didn't even know I had all that in there.
Thank you so much. You're going to get a chance to share more.
Yeah.
You have a wealth to share. Next, it's really a pleasure to introduce you to Justified Smith. He's someone that I've gotten to know in the course of some of the other events that I've put on. Justified is a prolific music writer, a very talented rap artist, and is CEO of his own company. As a father of a son and widowed single father of 2 girls, Justified understands the importance of fatherhood in a very real way. His life experience inspired him to create Fathers in Hip Hop, whose mission is to inject a positive outlook on fatherhood in the hip hop culture. His organization encourages its members to be a mirror for fatherhood in the hip hop culture and lets them know that while they see pictures of sex, money, guns, and drugs every day, it's time to establish the real narrative about what's going on in the hood. Fatherhood. Justified is partnered with Pimp Proofing Daughters, a movement that encourages men to teach their daughters to love themselves and value who they are, which is a powerful factor in breaking the cycle of domestic violence, sexual assault, sex trafficking, and poverty. The Pimp Proofing Daughters movement has taken off in California, gotten started in Texas, and has gained traction in the United Kingdom. Justified, welcome. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, and it's definitely a pleasure to be here representing for Fathers in Hip Hop and Daughters Lives Matter and the whole Pimp Proof movement. I'm glad to be here.
Great, thank you so much. Next, I'd like to introduce Yusuf Miller. Again, this is what happens with fathers, what's happening in the derailment of men is happening in all demographics. It's happening from all socioeconomic classes. It's happening in every race, every religion, every group. And we need all of us to step up and be on board. Yusuf Miller is a member of the San Diego County Anti-Human Trafficking and Commercial Sexual Exploitation of Children Advisory Council. He also works with a bunch of guys, how appropriate. What this group does is engage sex buyers online by running ads with profile pictures of women. And then once the sex buyer calls in, instead of getting a pimp, they get a man who shares with them about the harm they're doing and that their contact information will be passed on to law enforcement since what they are doing is illegal. Yusuf is the founder of Mosques Against Trafficking. And for those of you who are interested, there's a Christian version of Bunch of Guys that is run by Epic Project, and their website will be on the chat. This is so important for the disruption of human trafficking and disrupting those men who are going to engage in something destructive to themselves and others. Yusuf, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Patrick and Susan.
And last but not least, we have Reverend Dr. Patrick Nave, also known as Doc, affectionately. Reverend Dr. Patrick Nave, who goes by the nickname of Doc, is an ordained pastor, former missionary to Japan, konnichiwa, ohayou gozaimasu, and church planter in the Pacific Northwest. His professional degrees are numerous. For our purpose today, it's useful to know that he is a Doctor of Ministry degree in marriage and family therapy, and is a master's certified addiction professional. Doc owns a small addiction treatment center, Sojourners Recovery and Wellness Center in Lake Mary, Florida, and also runs a small Christian counseling center. He's the president of Bikers Against Trafficking, which fights to eradicate human sex trafficking, and he loves riding his Harley-Davidson Fat Boy motorcycle. In his work with Bikers Against Trafficking, Doc works on the demand side, has an agreement with several counties to work with sex addicts. BAT has a following of over 26,000 followers on Facebook, and Doc also runs a TikTok account with a following of almost 11,000 people, who's either attempting to educate on a wide variety of addiction and mental health issues. This man has got stories. This man has really seen a lot. And I'm so grateful that you're here with us, Doc.
Well, thanks, Patrick. It's quite the journey that we're all on, and it's an honor to share the journey with each of you and everybody that's kind of tuned in this morning. So thanks.
Thank you so much. So let's get right into it. I think there's 3 areas that we want to cover today. And the first thing is really looking at how do we engage men. I mean, so many of us have been in ministries and trying to get men involved and to take seriously an issue that's of such incredible importance to us socially and to our families, to our country, and across the world. And there's challenges. And so I think I'd like to start with each one of you sharing about your experience engaging men. How do you get them involved? How do you draw them in? And how do we keep men so that they find a liberation for themselves through this work of ending human trafficking, of taking this seriously? So I want to start with Pastor Arnold. If you can share a little bit about your work with HEMAT and what you find in engaging men in this fight.
Thank you again, Patrick and Susan. I found it easier to speak to men and let them know that it's very possible that there could be someone very close in their family that could be involved in this, or there could be friends and things of that nature that's close to them. Personal stories tend to bring people a little bit more personal into it instead of looking at human and sex trafficking as something that's far and distant. Here in Wisconsin, it hits over 72 different counties. That's all the counties here, and letting men know that they're not exempt. That's a way of pulling them in. I found that to be very helpful. And then after letting them know that this is indeed a reality and that we're contributing when we do things like hire women to come in and do lap dances, watching porn, just so many different avenues that we are supporting this instead of trying to push it away. And sometimes not even realizing that we're doing it. And so when I try to engage men, I try to engage them at a personal level. And I found that to be very helpful. Giving them parts of information regarding the education of sex trafficking is good, but you can't really get them there until you've established some type of relationship. That's what I have found to be very helpful, establishing those relationships. And you can do it in a mass group, you can do it at a church, you can do it at a business, but that's where I have found most success in engaging them personally.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah, so often men are doing things that they don't connect the dots to what they're participating in. Dan, how about you? Can you share a little bit about what you've been working on and what you found?
Yeah, one of the things I found is to realize that they can make a difference. You don't, for those that, for instance, don't necessarily work maybe as a social worker or law enforcement, in your sphere of influence, you can make a difference. Yeah. And I think most, especially fathers, want to have a protective kind of setting for their family. That's part of one of their roles. And that's gonna be one of the differences, is just your presence and your relationships, that you can make a difference. And so I think really encouraging them of the value of their role, because I talk to some men and they're like, I'm just needed for my paycheck at home, or those type of mentalities doesn't really help. And the other thing is just to help men to realize is the vulnerability of the people they love, whether it's their kids, grandkids. There's a lot of vulnerability with their own kids or grandkids or neighbors' kids that they can make a difference to engage with, and how valuable they are when they engage in relationships with the next generation. No child succeeds without a caring adult. And so they don't have to start a huge program. They can do one little thing. And so I think it can be so overwhelming, they don't do anything. So helping them to do the one next little thing to engage in the next generation is really important. Yeah,
that is so true. I think if we just start to realize just the house next door, or I mean, even in your own home, so often fathers are kind of out of touch with their own kids, and they don't realize that the vulnerabilities that they're sitting in and just regaining that trust relationship between a father and a child is so significant and important. Next, I'd like to talk to Doc. How about you, from your experience? Like, how do you get men engaged or to take this seriously or join with you?
Well, Patrick, we kind of have a unique approach in that, we look like bikers. So, and a lot of us are bikers. So, there's an appeal to some people and a repulsion to others. But we really want people to understand, and why we did the biker aspect is because we love to ride motorcycles, but we say motorcyclists are everywhere. And we want people to be the eyes and the ears of everywhere that they go. So by saying that, you get people's interest piqued. And we really talk about the power of grooming and vulnerability. So every guy has experienced some negative activity in their life, whether they've been abused or they've been molested or they were ridiculed, something. And so if you can tap it without, making them feel offended or hurt, you can actually bring that together to kind of inspire them to move in a way where they then take up a sword and can make a difference, right? Even if it's just for one person. And so we really try to direct them in that way.
It's really important. I think that's one of the areas that we've really allowed a lot of people to slip through the cracks is by not having an embracing, and a way for people to feel included and a part of something where they feel like they have to hide aspects of their life, and then they don't come forward and they don't resolve it. Really, really important. Next, Yusuf, I'd really like to hear what you're doing, your bunch of guys, and how you're engaging in men down there in San Diego.
Well, thank you, Patrick. I mean, when it comes to engaging men, we try to attack it from two angles. One, the current exploiter, and two, the potential exploiter. Both of these angles are super important for us to move that needle forward. In a bunch of guys, we focus on the current exploiter, someone who is trying to buy sex online, trying to exploit online, whether it's a pimp or a John. So when they get in contact with us, once we talk to them and give them enough rope to sort of tangle themselves up, then we explain to them. Some of them call us. We have a phone number associated with the web page. Some of them just text us or email us. And then we expose them to the harms. I mean, I was in the military for 24 years, and it was part of our culture that we thought it was a fee for service. But we break that myth down that this person is being exploited. They may seem like they're enjoying it because they're good actresses and actors, and this is part of their job so that they don't get hurt in the process behind them. A lot of people don't understand that. They think it's a fee for service. So we try to break down these myths after they contact us online. It doesn't always go that smoothly. I know that sounds like a pretty bow, but sometimes we get violent reactions. We get cursed out online. We get cursed out on the phone. But there are those men who take pause and listen to us, and hopefully that pierces their heart and their soul and make a change in those human beings. And one thing that helps pierce that soul is that their number is available to law enforcement. That shakes people up like you'd never believe. People begging me on the phone to take their phone number off the list, but I have no control over it. Even if it was my best friend that called and said, "Come on, man, we grew up together." I have no access to that number once it comes in. So it puts the fear of God in them. So from that perspective, it's very important. And from the other perspective of potential exploiters, tabling, we have to be in the community. We have to show up at fairs, whether it's a Comic-Con or a health fair or entertainment fair. We have to engage family members, men and boys, and mothers who are mothers of boys who the father might be absent. We need to be that figure to tell them that this is not appropriate. And if they're affected by this, come talk to us. I'm a man just like you, and I want to help you, not shame you for what's happened to you. So those two aspects, I think, are super important.
God, it's really interesting too what you said about kind of the mothers of sons. Because they really need to see that there are men taking this kind of a position and stand. It's really important. I think when we were doing the men standing against trafficking, that was one of one of the messages we really wanted to get across to women and to the girls that were in the life was that not all men are customers, that there are men who really do care. And that's really empowering to also to mothers, as well as to other men. Next, I'd like to go to Joe. Tell us a little bit about your work, your ministry, and engaging men.
Okay, so normally I offer to give a talk on human trafficking through mostly in Orange County, which is a demand center for trafficking, and with the support of the task force, law enforcement will come along if we can arrange it. But we try to reach out to groups of men, typically through churches. So the approach is to say, as a father, as a man who knows, like Pastor Dan was saying, you're a protector, to tell them about the danger to their children from pornography, from predators reaching out to their kids, and see if we can get them to, as a group, so not just individually, but since you're there together with other men, let's get together and talk about what you can do, which is typically going to be approaching schools and things like that with requests or demands for education on these subjects. So to be aware, to then in the community, the school, the church, to gather other people and say, are you aware of this? And get them active as a group. And you need support as a group. It's very hard to on your own do anything about it. Like Doc was saying about, if you got a group who wants to work together on it, it's really got the chance to be effective. So I'm mostly speaking to guys in church, trying to get them to understand that it happens here. This is demand center. In fact, predators are looking for your children. Let's make sure it stops instead of continuing to get worse and worse. And guys want to help. So the big challenge really is, what do we give them to do? So looking forward to talking more and hearing more about that. Thanks.
That's great. That is the challenge. You have men who show up once or twice, but how do you keep them engaged? How do we keep them taking this seriously to where they don't just drift back? Ken, can you share a little bit about your experience in working with men and engaging men and how you get them to take this seriously?
Yeah, I think a little bit of what everyone said for the most part, especially Doc and Pastor CFAX, because I think you definitely have to have a little bit of both of those. It's basically using the power of what your power. God gives every last one of us a power. Everyone on this call today has a power. You have a gift. And I believe most of us, has a special anointing, and if not, will have one at some point in your life. And I know that mine is inspiration. That's something God has. That's that mantle He's given me. That's something I'm passionate about. So I always seek to inspire. And the important thing about inspiration is that to seek to inspire somebody, to seek to inspire a man, you must view him as worthy. Regardless of what he's doing or what he's done, you must view him as worthy. And I view every man I come in contact with. I don't know if he just finished watching porn. I don't know if he just finished having a session or whatever. I view every man as because that's what God sees. God sees every last one of us, no matter how low we are, as worthy. And so what I seek to do is just inspire by sharing, my passion in this fight. And why I do what I do, and sometimes depending on if it's a father, I share about me being, how passionate I am about being a father of a daughter, and that huge responsibility we have. And I think, what you do is you use social intelligence and you try your best to engage with the person that you're speaking to. As you learn more, you kind of, share things that make sense in any conversation. I don't look at it as this task. Oh, I got to get this man, involved. No, I'm about being authentic. I'm about walking in my purpose, being authentic. But with any conversation, I want it to make sense. So if I'm talking to another father, then when I start talking about human trafficking, because of course I want to share that with everybody everywhere I go, because I just believe that the more we do that, the better off we will all be, because you're giving someone, education or whatever. So as the work I'm doing here, this is specifically with Code Black. I took on that challenge because I feel God gave me that vision to really go after helping heal the Black community. And why did I choose the Black community? Because I know that community very well. So I know our strengths and I know our weaknesses. I know our challenges. I know hip hop culture. You know, I'm a very major music person. You know, and we have to be able to speak to that. You know what I mean? And it takes a special person to do that. But also, I have a major passion for the youth. You know, as we've seen, God has always used the youth. Even himself, when he started his ministry, you know, really and truly, you know, he started, you know, going out preaching, doing God's business as early as 12 years old, from what we see from the word. And just helping them to not, I don't talk about human trafficking so much. What I'm doing is actually trying to empower them and help them understand what is trauma, how does that look, how does that show up in a community, how does it show up in our community, right? What does healing look like? Those kind of things. I talk about empowerment when it comes down to finances and life. We talk about justice, you know, knowing your rights and things of that nature. So for me, it's speaking to those young men, but because they're so young, especially Division 1, which is 12 to 17, it is absolutely necessary, and I make it mandatory that some adults, whether it's biological parents or guardians, must be involved. Now, what I mean by that is engaging with me, knowing exactly what we're doing at all times, that kind of thing. And when there's men involved, like uncles, grandpas, dads, you know, I invite them to come and just sit in the back, you know, to certain sessions and things like that. Now, if it's sessions I want the boys to get really real with, then no, I don't invite, you know, they can stay outside because I want them to be honest and not feel like they don't want to share anything because dad is there, grandpa is there. And then my older division, I go a little bit harder. That's 18 to 24. You know, these guys most of them have already been having sex, you know, and things of that nature. They're into the hip hop, you know, they're using terms like I'm a pimp, you know, whether and most of them don't want to be an actual pimp. Actually, most of them that I'm finding, they're actually disgusted by actual pimps, but that slang in the culture, you know, it's cool to say, oh, I'm a pimp because I get, you know, many girls, a lot of girls like me. So what I do is I just kind of make it relevant, but my whole goal is to inspire these men everywhere I go. And God has really been blessing me, from the barbershop to real estate guys to meeting guys. I mean, literally, he's really been blessing me, and I pray he keeps that anointing on me. I have so many guys that even guys that know nothing about this, after I talk with them, they text me, they call me, man, I can't sleep. I just want to know more. I want to be involved. And so it goes to show you that the men out there really want to be involved in this. They want to make a change. They want to do better, even with their own lives, right? But we're still men. And so, like Doc was saying, you know, the last thing we want to do is shame anyone. It's already harder for us with just the culture of men not really expressing our feelings, and told that is actually weakness, you know, to be sensitive and to be vulnerable and open. You have to set a certain space aside to do those things. But in the initial, you know, meet and greet, you know, just try to look to inspire people. Like what do you feel would inspire this guy?
Yeah, that's so interesting. Like how you create the kind of opening for people to be able to share. I mean, using what you're interested in, what you're fascinated by, whether it's biking or hip hop music, but using that as a base then to really approach guys, but then to let them share. I think the point that Yusuf made, guys about to find out that his number is going to be turned over to the police and he's going to be exposed. We need to create an environment where guys feel that they can expose themselves to someone and start to make that change in their life. And I think it's something that just hasn't been developed enough. A safe space for guys to be able to start to deal with what they're feeling and thinking. Justified, your experience is quite unique in that becoming a widowed father of girls and having to take on a lot of that responsibility. And you're what you've done and expanded that beyond your own home and taking that into fathers through Fathers in Hip Hop. It's just really, really impressive and fascinating. Can you share about your work now? How do you engage with men and what is your approach towards men?
Well, before it was Fathers in Hip Hop, we went by Mafia, MOFIA, and that was Men of Faith in Action. And, you know, my wife was still living during this time, because I always felt that if men came together, that we could do something powerful, that we could, you know, lead our communities. And it wasn't until after my wife's passing that, God revealed to me that that man of faith in action was a father, and that the responsibility of a father can create a lot of positive change in the communities. I feel like if a father is living up to the role of a father, that we can increase graduation, decrease incarceration, and that we could just make our communities a better place and whole. Because if fathers are fathering, our children are the product, and that's what we're pushing out into the community. So if we're doing our jobs correctly, these children go out into the community and they become better people. And so I feel that way. And as far as being able to engage with men, really transparency and testimony. I'm not big on, you don't point the finger. I try to always talk about my perspective or my life, my experiences. And then you'll find out that there's a lot of other people out there that can relate. And then it opens them up to want to speak or to add to what's being said. So it's like when you go into a church and you got the preacher that's just like, he's giving the word, but it makes a person uncomfortable because it's like, you're talking about me. But when you can bring it to the table and bring from self and experience, it kind of lightens the load and makes the people feel like, damn, I'm not alone in this. Like, he went through that too. So I've always felt that testimony was more powerful than preaching. That's just me.
That's good. I think I'm kind of drawn back to something that Dan said, mentioning that so many men just feel like insignificant. They feel like their impact really isn't so great. So that leads to really being tempted to get off the rails and to justify behavior that actually goes counter to their being a man, to kind of the healthy masculinity that we start out with or hope to have. But how do we increase that sense of significance in men so that that they realize the impact that they're having on their community, on their families, on their children? And anyone, just if you have a thought, just kind of shout out, because I think this is one of the struggles we're really up against is that men that kind of we demote our own impact and our own significance, and that leads to an awful lot of problems.
I think part of it, the importance is you have to redefine what manhood is, right? Depending on your era, where you grew up, your culture, a man have a certain designation. This is what it looks like. And so if you look at yourself and you redefine, right, reframe what a man is, and man is strong. But if you somehow put into the DNA of that rediscovery that a strong man asks for help, that's part of the norm, then what you see is guys will reach out, because if they have an issue, they can reach out and understand how to overcome it. A lot of people don't have the tools to overcome stuff, and so they stumble. But if you can kind of change the dialogue, reframe it, where they know that, okay, being a good godly man is being a good godly man who has problems but doesn't give up and sees those problems as amazing opportunities to grow. And if you can kind of change the culture, then it kind of permeates from there because they model that.
Great.
Yeah, piggyback, great job, Doc, because I totally agree. And again, it's like what I was going back to, what I was saying earlier is, this is where you really use your social intelligence, and you don't have to be, a genius to do this. It is, for instance, if, I'm a man of faith. Well, if I'm talking to a man of faith, then I'm going to speak to a man of faith with God's word, right? What did God create men to be? What is his role? When we look at the word, what is his role for men, right? Why did he even create a woman? To be a helpmate for what? What does he mean when he says, like, husbands, if you're a husband, love your wives like Christ loved the church? What does that look like? And men who are godly men, they love that. Even if they are young in the faith, they are excited to be taught and trained, right? And so it's important for us, to speak that way, to speak to godly men, then we use that manner, because, me as a man of faith, I'm not interested personally in learning, and I'm just being completely transparent, interested in learning about how to be a husband and things like that from a non-believer. That's just my personal conviction, because I want to be able to I use scripture to guide my life. You know, I've been married 15 years, so I know not that long, but it's not that brand new, going on 16, you know, father of an 11-year-old daughter. And, you know, that has been leading me very well and serving me well in life. And that's what I look for. However, I understand the fact is that everybody is not a believer in the Most High. Everybody doesn't honor and basically believe in Yahweh. So what do you do when you speak like that? Well, then it would be honestly not valuable to speak about Christ. So you talk about men in society, like what Doc is saying. And what it works there is like, who am I to tell you what a man looks like, right? But what I can do and what has been very powerful and what God has showed me for about 10 years, you know, being a part of groups where we bring all these men from different backgrounds, different races, socioeconomic status, educational levels, where real men come together and have a safe place. And, you know, those new guys who come in there, of course, they're going to be awkward. And some will tell you, when you start sharing, this is weird. You know, they've been like, bro, I've never, honestly, I'm so uncomfortable right now. Some have even told me I'm intimidated. And it's fine. They don't have to say anything. The goal is just come and just sit. Because what's happening now is we are now exposing them to something different, something new with men, real men. You have men, you know, that are big burly men. You have biker men. You have all kinds of different men, you know, that come together and now, but they're sharing their hearts. They're being open. They're talking about issues. You know, you've had tears shared. And I'm telling you, like, it's very powerful. It is very powerful to witness that, because now you're showing them a different experience and redefining what a man is and what a man looks like. And
yeah, that seems to be a really key point, is that you're showing somebody what to aspire to. The more that we kind of enable men to see that, then they can kind of gravitate to it. I think moving into the area of what is derailing men. So many men are getting drawn away from being that father, that husband, that man that they want and envision for themselves, are being derailed. And I think one of the key areas where that is happening is through pornography. I think the damage that's being done through 24/7 access to hardcore pornography to children, to anyone of any age, is just an incalculable damage and harm that's being done in our society. And this really has to be addressed, because it's feeding the demand for human trafficking. And it's also feeding the requirement for more victims of human trafficking, because they're going to have to do the performing of more and more extreme acts. Doc, do you have experience like with kind of dealing with pornography and how it's affecting men and how it's feeding kind of the demand of human trafficking?
We do. We see a lot of men whose journey has always been touched by pornography. And, you know, there's hardcore pornography, and nowadays there's this softcore, which comes through Instagram and Twitter, where it's scantily dragged, right? And it's like a appetizer that kind of drives the person into harder core porn. And what people don't realize is when they get that experience, their brain chemistry changes. And so you become an addict, and you have the same chemistry as anybody battling a process addiction or a chemical addiction. So the way your brain functions changes. And you want that drug, whether it's the dopamine glutamate that comes through your brain through a neural pathway that hits that nucleus accumbens and gives you that moment of pleasure where you don't feel pain. You just want this pleasure point. So pornography became an easy way to get dopamine on demand. So if you're stressed, use pornography. If you're overwhelmed, if you're lonely, whatever it is, right, it drives them to it. And so when I talk to most guys, they don't understand two key things. One is what drives a high level of dopamine is a sex act or performance of something you want. But what gives you even a higher hit of dopamine is some sort of sex act that is connected to something that repulses you. So something that you think, and that's the danger of educating people where they have guilt. They can actually use that guilt and then an act of sex and get a higher hit of dopamine. So by default, we create a worse addict. And you really have to explain that to them and process it with them, because all of them deal with pornography.
Yeah, it's so pervasive. Joe, what about you and your ministry? Do you have to deal with pornography, I think?
Well, since that's the big driver, the big gateway, if you will, what helps is most men initially at least don't understand what Doc was saying, what it really does to them in their brain. And if you follow that through, you realize you become something that's not the man you ever wanted to be. You're going to become somebody who is not life-giving, who's abusive, who's everything you would despise if you thought about it. And it's going to change you. And most men, I think, don't want to be changed into something that they would look down on. So to realize that that's going to take you there is something to give you the strength maybe to try to fight it. And to realize that really that thing we're seeing in, suddenly erectile dysfunction in men under 40 is a thing, never used to be a thing, but pornography is bringing you to the point where you can't have a relationship with a real person anymore. There is no way to have a loving relationship that involves your God-given sexuality. The devil, if you will, is attacking us at our most vulnerable place. And, just to help men understand where this goes and to realize that it's reaching out for their 10-year-old sons as well. And, it'll give us the strength to do something about it. So I hope that's the case.
I know. Just recently, my wife went to go visit a young mother they have a teenage daughter and an 8-year-old son, and this kind of really drove things home to me. This was a father, it was a really good man, good father, but he had been sexually molested by his mother when he was a child, when he was about 5 or 6, and his mother had been abused by her father, and her grandmother had been abused by her father. It was, just multi-generational, passed down. But this man, he'd been good as a father. He'd been doing everything right, taking care of his family, working hard. When his son reached the age at which he had been abused, something triggered in him, and he started then going to porn as a way to kind of deal with that triggering. And he started looking at sexual abuse, and then it became looking at child pornography. This is, the split in himself, this kind of being torn into two people, where wanting to be this good father, but also being triggered by his own past, and then starting to look at child pornography. And then he starts getting these messages blackmailing him that if you don't pay all this money, we're going to expose you as watching child pornography. Was too much. And this father ended up committing suicide just very recently. And now we have 2 children who are going to grow up without a father, who are in a very vulnerable position, which is exactly what traffickers prey on. And I think that the impact of pornography, when men start to get into it, I mean, it feels good, and it seems like this is a solution to their anger, their frustration, their loneliness, whatever it is that they're medicating. But very quickly you start to devolve into, as Joe says, you're becoming a different person, because porn is designed to make you as a gravity to pull you to a deeper and deeper levels away from your true nature and your true self. It wants to redefine who you are, and you start crossing lines. You start crossing those lines, and then you need to cross more lines, and it's just incredibly damaging in that way. And we really need to address it. We need to address it in a way that men can honestly and openly talk about what they're going through, what they've done, and what they've experienced. And I think that's where, for me, a lot of what's happened within the church is more leaning on the shame side and the sinfulness of people's actions. And that's driven more men away. It's driven them away from the church. It's driven them farther into their behavior and into this cycle. And those of you who have read The Little Prince, where the drunkard is drinking to forget that he feels miserable because he's drinking. And so you have this very sick cycle that's created. And for so many men, they don't realize that they're maybe intersecting with human trafficking. You have no way of knowing if that girl that's performing is a victim of human trafficking. And also, people don't realize that every time you click on a free site, every time you click, that's being registered and being recorded by that company, so that they have to then produce more content and more content. So there's a lot of ways that men intersect. And I think when we can inspire men to kind of rise above that, to see that someone is really trying to steal your identity and who you are, there's more resistance that comes. There's more sharing together. We start to join together as men and support each other in overcoming this. I don't, Dan, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think one of the real important things is for anybody who's any leader in any community, whether it's in your family, a faith community, church, is how we talk about it really makes a difference. I one time, for instance, my church had decided I was actually openly, like not in a shame-based way, but in a compassionate way, actually talked about sexual abuse is not just for women, but happens to men. And it's amazing all of a sudden what happens in my office. I have men who need to talk about it. I had a friend who was a therapist, and she decided to become a specialist in the area of sexuality. And all of a sudden, at the end of her first session, she said, you know, in week 2 of our counseling session, if there's anything else you want to talk about regards your family or life or marriage or sexuality, feel free to bring that up next session. And she said, I had a 50% increase of couples that needed to talk about their sex life just because I started talking about it myself. So as leaders, when we don't talk about things in a healthy way, or if we don't talk about it or just in a shame-based way, what happens is there's the power of secret. And secrets on top of addictions, it's like throwing fuel on the fire. And so the more we can talk about it in a healthy way and not in an awkward way, but just an open, honest way, it gives freedom for others to get the help they need. But when we don't talk about it, the power of secret just makes it worse.
Yeah, it's really true.
Yeah, I want to share too, on what Dan is saying. Number one, when we're looking at these places and entities like churches, we shouldn't even have men. It's just like we treat it with survivors of human anti-sex trafficking, right? I believe that with all these divergent classes, and many times, I've hosted classes or whatever, I've never allowed a class to be taught by anyone but a survivor of sex trafficking, right? Because they understand, they've been in that same place. They understand, they have that we can be academically, we can understand, but there's nothing like someone who has lived the experience and who understands that trauma and things of that nature. So it's the same thing in this. I don't think a man who's never battled, with porn should stand in any group. I don't, and talk. You can do a conference and you can share a lot of the academic things that happens when you're in porn, but if that has never been your struggle and God hasn't delivered you from that, I don't believe, that's my personal conviction, that you should be that man standing there trying to talk to these men, right? Because just the fact of knowing that you haven't done it, as a man, and I'm speaking from personal experience, you haven't done it as a man, there's a shame. Even if you're speaking lovingly and all this and that, I still feel there's some kind of judgment in you because I have gotten dirty that way and you have somehow been able to be stronger than me and stay clean. And I think we have to think like that. We're still men and we can't be fooled in that way. So I think, that's one thing. The other thing is, when we talk about the porn is an act. Like when we said, like when someone sins, we all sin. And that's something I train in churches with a lot of pastors. Don't sit there and further embarrass someone and talk about the sin. Do you know how much courage it took them to even come and get in your face and sit with you and maybe some of these leaders to kind of talk about this? It took so much courage and they have so much anxiety at this point. The last thing they want to come do is sit and reiterate and talk about this ugly sin that they got entangled in, right? So what we want to do is to work on the prevention piece, right? We want to talk about that. We want to work out, and because the thing is, yes, porn is something, it's an action, but there's something happens before we act, right? There's something, it starts in the mind, it starts in the heart, then it becomes an action. So what we have to do is in the churches, we would do a lot less of having to talk about porn and deal with this if we talked about sex earlier on in the church, and especially in some of these youth groups and ministries, and got parents to understand the importance of this, and start talking about this, because you're not talking about it, but guess what? They're hearing it in the streets. I was learning about sex literally in elementary. I'm going to be very clear. I don't know about you guys, but I was hearing people talk about sex as early as elementary. And I'm sure some of them probably were molested, witnessed some things they shouldn't have seen. Who knows? But they were talking about it. I got exposed to that in my mind early on. And I wasn't the only one. There was lots of them. boys and girls. So they're going to learn, and we're a lot more advanced now than what we were. We have a lot more exposure to a lot of unhealthy things than we did. We didn't have songs like WAP, you know, when I was growing up with Nicki Minaj, Cardi B and them talking about their vagina. Let's be honest about it. That's playing on the radio. You know, that's Bo. I didn't hear strip clubs and see all these reality shows like they're exposed to. You know, that's what I'm saying. So if we are trying to turn a blind eye and act like that stuff don't exist, then all we're doing is fighting against ourselves. So we have to be honest and talk about this. And many of us, you know, I'm looking at this screen. I look like everyone for sure is over 30 years old. I'm 45 myself. So we have to make sure that, you know, we get into the times and then we deal with our own things, because some of us have things we probably haven't broken. It's too dark to talk about or whatever. Yeah. But if you're going to be in this fight, this is not a clean fight. This is not a pretty fight. This is a grimy fight. And so we can't come in here with this polished, you know, clean, proper, you know, if we're going to make a difference and God's going to use us, we must be open to being pushed ourselves, challenged ourselves to grow in this area. But we got to talk about this stuff first to prevent it, to empower kids to understand and how unhealthy this stuff is early on. And I'm talking about anything like shows. And I'll give one quick example. I don't even know what the show was. You know, it was some supposedly Disney teenage show. I'm personally, just to be honest, I am not a Disney fan. I don't like fantasy at all. My wife is completely opposite. But so a lot of those shows I don't pay attention to. But then I do pay attention to certain scenes. If there's language I don't like, if there's like mean girl stuff I don't like, you know, any of that, my radar comes up no matter what I'm doing. And there was a scene where this girl fell on, they were on some bus or something, and she fell in the lap of this boy. And then she's staring, looking at him in the face, and she's still sitting on his lap. And it's, you know, this public bus system, and all of a sudden they look and they kiss. So I say, I said, what is that? What's the name of the show? And they're looking at me, my wife and daughter, and I'm like, okay. I said, well, how old are those kids? And my daughter was like, I don't know. I said, well, how do you think they are? I said, you've been watching it. So she said, well, junior high. I said, okay. So is it appropriate? Do you think it's appropriate for a young lady in junior high to sit on the boy's lap like that? I said, and kiss him? And she was like, no. I said, okay, pause this. So we had a little discussion about that. Like, what would you do if you were in that situation? Why is that inappropriate? Why do you think it's inappropriate? Are you just saying that because you think I think it's inappropriate? Like, what makes it inappropriate to you? And stopping and teaching in the moment, right? So we must do this in our churches. We must do this. In my program with the Code Black, we talk about sex, okay? And some have never, but I let the parents know before, and I let them know what my angle is going to be, but we're going to talk about it. So if you're not comfortable, that kid can miss that session or whatever, but I'm always going to be trying my best to be responsible with people's children, just like I am with mine. But we got to talk about this stuff because they're hearing it, and especially males. We learn early. Every man on here, for the most part, should be able to attest that is a big talk as early as junior high to start testing your manhood. Is, can you get girls? Have you slept with anybody? If you haven't, then you are a punk. You must be gay. You know, you are whatever. That starts early for us, I know. You know, and so we must think about those things and start preventing as much as possible and talking about the dangers of porn where they can understand that. You know, because no one wants to be controlled.
This is a great segue then into fatherhood. Really, like the responsibility of fathers, because I think we have really kind of dropped the ball on having the talk with our kids, and somebody's taken over the role. Justified, why don't you start us off on a conversation about fatherhood, because you have a unique experience as a dad, and just how important the role of a father is in what we're talking about.
Well, if I could touch on what Kenny was talking about, when he was talking about what we didn't have, and he said it wasn't songs like WAP, and you know, he knows what that means. Maybe some of y'all don't. And like he said, it's all about not sugarcoating things. And I'm literally disgusted when I'm listening to, you know, the radio in the car, especially men have known to be vulgar, but now it's the women, it's the female artists that are really pushing this sexual agenda. And how can any man feel comfortable in the car with his kids in the back seat and you hear Nicki Minaj saying, you want this wet ass, you know, like it's an anger. Even with my female that I'm, in relationship with, it makes me look at her crazy when I'm like, who are you? That this turns you up, and trust me, I'm a sexual being, but just to know that this message and this agenda is being hit so hard on our children, because see, me and people like Kenny, he said he's 45, I'm 42. When we were young listening to rap, the world wanted to ban 2 Live Crew for saying me so horny.
Yeah.
You feel me?
Right.
But now it seems that everything that was once wrong is highly acceptable. And it seems as if they figured out, let us help them destroy themselves. And I think that's where Fathers in Hip Hop comes into play, because now, and I reach out, I'm West Coast, grew up on gangster rap. In my career, I've interacted with a lot of the OGs, the Snoop Dogs, the MC8s. Those are all in my circle of people that I'm backstage with and I hang out with. And my message to them is, and Ice Cube was saying, you might know this, Kenny. Ice Cube proudly says, we started this gangster shit, right? Like that, they proud of that. But are you teaching that gangster shit to your kids? Because most of these people, celebrity musicians, they talk all this drugs, gangsters, and this, that, the other, but their kids are in private school.
Yes.
Their kids aren't exposed to that. So it makes me feel like you guys are agents of the enemy, and that you're being paid to send our children down a path. And people talk about selling your soul. It's not a meeting with a physical devil. It's what you're willing to do in exchange for a cash payout. That's what I see as selling my soul. You lose your morals, you lose, any sense of realism in order to get paid. And unfortunately, the hip hop industry has been utilized for that purpose. So me being an older, guy in the rap game, my question to the artists that started this gangster shit is, what do we do now that you know better? You were 19, 20, 21. Maybe we were a little ignorant, but now you're grown. Now you got kids. I'm calling you out. Why are you still saying this when that's not really what you're living anymore? Because you're pushing something on our children that you yourselves don't even want for your kids. So it's time for a level of accountability. And I tell the artists, through music, through conversations backstage or at events, like, bro, if we're the ones that started this, we're the ones that have to put an end to this. We have to come back and we have to create new content to let these people know we were wrong. We were confused. We didn't quite understand life yet. But now that we're fathers, we have a different message to bring. But if if these guys are still in their 40s and they're still talking about killing, partying, and like, where does our content mature? And I think that's the call that, Fathers in Hip Hop is able to bring, because like you said earlier, you don't want to hear something from somebody who ain't been there, done that. So if I never walked this life of gangster rap, if I never, participated in this gangster rap, then who am I to try to tell somebody to don't do it no more? If I myself haven't been able to climb out of that, that hole. So the age that we're living in is too much information. When you talk about porno, it's right here.
Yeah.
Now, as a child, I watched some porn. I'm gonna keep it 1,000 with you. When my mom and daddy left, I popped out my little tape. We had the VCR, and I did my little thing. Do you know what damage I would have done to myself if I had this?
Right.
Yep.
You ain't got to sneak. You go in the bathroom and handle it, So when I think about the technology that's available to our children, it's scary, because, my father could say, turn that music off. I don't want that in my house. And it was only one way to play it, through the record player or the stereo. We had Walkman, but now it's right here.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't, when I hear my daughter listening to certain stuff, I don't go hard on her like my father did. because I know I can't control it. So I'd rather just give her that, like, this isn't real. A lot of these young rappers are rapping about being depressed, wanting to die, overdosing on pills. And then here I have my daughter who is going through things and have cut on herself. And as an artist, I'm telling her, stop listening to that bullshit. Excuse my language, or I get passionate and I'm real and I don't go to China speaking French. When you're in a dirty game, sometimes you got to translate it that way. But I tell her, it's this music you're listening to. All these dudes is talking about is depressed and how hard, you don't have a hard life. Yes, you lost your mother, but you have a roof over your head. You have food in the refrigerator. You're on Fashion Nova ordering clothes all the time with my money. Like, you have nothing to be sad and depressed about. Why are you listening to this depressing music? And when you understand that it's a spirit, it's power in the tongue. So if all day she's listening to, I'm sad, I need a pill, I need to get my pain away, even though she's not experiencing that, it becomes a part of her because the power of the words is strong. So Fathers in Hip Hop wants to be able to combat, and really, I'm trying to build our influence up to where we can go head to head with these.
Yeah, I really recommend anybody who hasn't really look up this man, really connect to Justified and what he's doing and the leadership he's taking as a father with his daughters and with Fathers in Hip Hop. So I really hope people will go and check out your site and connect to you, because you have an incredible voice that needs to be heard. I want to share a little bit about my work with FatherCon. In establishing FatherCon was really we wanted to address fathers who are currently fathers, good fathers, and also those who have been knocked off course. We want to address future fathers, like the young guys who are preparing to become dads, and also father figures. That all three of those really need to be addressed. So through FatherCon, we really tried to get a message across to men, not just the threats and the dangers and all of that, but really to celebrate what it means to be a dad, the incredible blessing and honor that it is to be entrusted with children, and that there are real consequences for how we treat them and how we behave. Alan Smith, I know he's here, he wrote a book to really get men engaged in the fight against human trafficking. But there's a part of that book when he talks about really become an intentional dad, really thinking ahead. What kind of father am I going to be to my daughters? And we really have to encourage future fathers to really start to look at the impact that they're going to have on their kids. Because we have a messaging, I think since the 1960s, there's been this messaging of insignificance, of the father being less important in the shaping of how children grow and how they develop. And yet now with 50 years of research, we know that that's absolute bunk. And that fathers play an absolute instrumental role in shaping the values and in the character of their children, both boys and girls. So we really need to elevate the whole sense of the significance of fatherhood. And that's really what we want to accomplish through FatherCon. And I really encourage everyone to kind of really check out Alan's book, because I think it's really, this is a valuable tool in our fight to really engage more men in the fight against human trafficking, and really looking at intentional fatherhood. I also want to call Pastor Syfax, if you can share a little bit too about fatherhood from your perspective, from your work. I'd really love to hear that.
Absolutely. I think part of the thing that really got me involved in this is because I have 3 sons and I have 5 grandchildren. I've been involved with ministry for a very long time, but my passion has always been, and I think my anointing is set on men and boys. I work with a group of boys, or used to work with a group of boys in a very depressed area where it was the 53206 area. That's the zip code, and it's considered the worst place in America to raise a black boy. And so we got involved with teaching them and being a male figure in their life because of the lack of trust that they had, and the lack of trust that they've encountered with so many men, either to abuse them, take advantage of them, and fathers that weren't at home, and they just turned out to be very, very hardcore. And so I believe that as a father, and moving kids and young adults and teenagers where we want them to push away this human traffic, sex traffic, porn, and all of that. It starts with establishing a very intentional, honest conversation. That's why I keep going back to rapport, establishing that relationship. Because if you don't have a connection with these kids, with these young adults, they're not going to hear you. You know, I don't care how much information you got, how much history you've been through. I can tell folks all day that, I grew up in Chicago. I was on the streets. I was involved in gang. Yeah, I screwed around with everybody. And from that perspective, you'll catch their ear. But if you don't give them the true education of what happens now, or what's happening when you look at porn, or what's happening when you go to that next step, I think that medical piece needs to be understood. What's happening in the brain, that needs to be understood. What's happening in your relationship, why you can't, I know you got women on why you can't get up anymore with your girl, with your wife, and how porn moves into that. I discussed a lot of stuff with my kids when they were growing up. My big thing was making sure that they are prepared for this, for street life and education. Because truth be told, I came from street. So to not give them that understanding and let them know that, okay, as your dad, I don't want you to fall into those tracks that I fell into. There's a lot of things that I went through that you don't have to go through. You don't have to experience that in order for you not to do it. So as a dad, what I decided to do is to model that for them. And I believe that if we can teach men to model men and manship, in front of our boys and our girls, they need to see, what does a man look like, when he gets pissed off? What does a man look like when he's approached by porn? What do you do when something comes your way and you don't know how to handle it? They need to see how dad's going to respond, how he's going to respond to these different issues that face him. And so as a father, I believe that it's important to drill into kids while they're young. But if we've missed that, we still have a chance, as long as they're alive, to drill into them and to model for them what it means to be a man. That's what I had to do for my 3 boys. They're now all married. They all have kids. And now I'm looking at my grandkids, because I have 2 little granddaughters, and I can't help but to continue to think about the possibility of them being pulled in through the internet. Mass media is out there, and like my man said, Justice, yes, this technology, it's a two-edged sword, and we can't be too careful. I mean, porn is there 24/7 and it's free. You ain't got to put in a VCR. You ain't got to do all that anymore. It's free and it's right there, and it's destroying the thinking. So as a father, I try to move kids, and as a youth director, I try to move those kids as well, with parents' consent, of course, to a place of understanding that sex ain't something that's dirty. Sex is a good thing, but there's a time period when you are ready for that. And explaining that honestly and truthfully to kids that no, sex ain't bad. It's just a lot of abuse out there. And then letting them know that everything you put on social media is recorded for life, and letting them know that these pieces that you put your stuff, this is not your diary. You don't have to put in, okay, I ate today, I'm mad at the world. This is not your diary. Explaining that to them with
it's so true.
Open communication, this establishes a rapport, and then a soft introduction into all of those ills that are out there that'll move them to that next level of abusing themselves, abusing their minds. I mean, there hasn't been a rehabilitation place created to get people out of this. The only thing that's going to change their mind, and I know we have a variety of people, but this has been my belief. This is where I sit. This is what I'm thinking. You can't change an individual. You have to change the heart. And when the heart is changed, the mind is changed. When the mind is changed, the direction is changed. And when the direction is changed with the information that you get from the Holy Spirit, it will move you to a place of understanding. reading this stuff, understanding this stuff will move, I believe, men, boys, girls to a whole nother level of how to cope with a society that's really pushing them into sexuality before their time. Everything has been sexual.
It's so true. Everything's out there. It's a 24/7 assault on integrity, I think, is what we're the society that we're now living in. I think you hit on something really important, is the modeling. And I think, divorced or not, we really have to start to take account for the impact that we're going to have on what we're modeling. And so as fathers, how we treat our ex-wife, how we treat our wife, all of those things are going into the database that our children are going to use for how they're going to live and make the choices for their lives.
We've actually come to the end of our time. So Patrick, I just want to thank everyone for being here. I mean, it's just been awesome. And Patrick, I want to give you an opportunity just to close and say what you'd like to say. Go ahead.
God, I just think it's been so inspiring just to hear everyone's point of view and to get introduced to Pastor Cy and to Doc, people that I have not met before in the real world, but that there are so many people doing so much on so many different levels, and we need that. We need to kind of partner together. We need to kind of see where we overlap and to fill the gaps that are still there. We need marriage family therapists. We need people in all the different capacities that they have. We need bike riders. We need wherever you're at, whatever you're involved in, whatever is interesting to you, use that as an instrument then to get the message out to others. Because the more real it is to you, like Justified with hip hop music, the more real this is to you, and the more real something is in your sphere and in your life, that's going to be a great tool for you to reach out to others and to message to others. There's just, I mean, the pace at which things are developing and devolving, and the opportunities to derail are so ever present, and we have to really start laying down fresh rails to get people back on track. And I really hope that everyone takes from this that there is something you can do. Every single one of us has something we can do, whether it's a table, whether it's starting an activity as men, dealing with the issue of pornography. Absolutely, every single person on this call has got something they can do, and do it better and do it more. And the more that we cooperate and share, the better off we're going to be. So I'm just so grateful to Susan. I'm grateful to every single one of you on the panel and every single person that tuned in today. It just seems like there's just a light at the end of the tunnel when we all get together like this. So let's make it happen.
Yeah, it gives us hope. Yes. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to keep the chat open if you want to chat back and forth. We're going to end the formal part of the discussion, and this has been so powerful. I'm so excited to be able to share this on social media and all my platforms, and you're all welcome to do that also. So have a blessed day. Thank you.